a MEV release in 2019? That's what we're going to talk about today. You've joined the Bi-vocational Ministry channel. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and briefly go over this. Here's the order. I'm going to give some disclaimers, and then I'm going to tell you about the update that I've heard up to this point, and then I'm going to answer some comments that were made on the videos about the MEV and maybe help clarify a few things and like I said, just kind of answer. But on that note, I'm going to try to go through these very quickly so that way the video is not too long. And what you'll notice is beneath in the information box is a list of the questions. I'm going to put the times at which I answer those questions beside them. I can't guarantee you the link because I really don't know how that works. I don't have experience with it. So, but at least you'll know the times by which if you have a specific question, you can look down through the questions and perhaps find it that way, or you can watch the whole thing. So let's start off with some disclaimers. Okay, I am not going to answer questions about or comments about the KJVO position. And though I appreciate the King James very much, I'm going to stick to questions in regard to the MEV translation. Okay. Second disclaimer, I am not going to debate certain theological topics. That's not the point of this video. Though I love to talk about theology, though I love to talk about theological topics, that's not the point of this video. The whole point of the video is the MEV translation. Regardless of what translation you use, you'll always have to study, regardless. So anyway, I'll leave that there. So the next disclaimer is every translation went through a process like the MEV is doing. Some perpetuate this process, like the ESV, who every 3 or 4 years comes up with an update. The Holman Christian did something like that. And it's a perpetual updating of the Bible to bring it up to current language, okay? So, but again, and correct things. But this is a very normal process for translations to go through. They go through an initial release, they get feedback, they update, then they republish the updated edition. So I'm going to read this. So there are renderings I do find unfortunate. I am not an advocate for every verse of this translation. So please do not misunderstand me. There are verses in this translation that I find to be unfortunate. This translation obviously needs to be corrected in a number of places. What I will say is that normal people, normal people. What is normal outside of a setting on a washing machine? Anyway, so this is normal. You don't freak out yet, okay? The MEV publishers, if they're willing to correct it, then great. If they're not, then make your judgments then. But be patient with the process because every translation goes through this. Every translation. And they published a lot, evidently too many Bibles. They still have an overstock. And so that's the dilemma they're in right now. But just be patient with the process. Don't just condemn it already because of an initial publishing and some corrections that need to be made because of that, or in that first publishing. This video is not about the defense of the traditional text. It assumes a traditional text point of view and to use the terminology of Robert Truelove, a canonical approach to the biblical text. All right, the next disclaimer is I do not represent or speak for Charisma Media nor Passover or Passio. I do not speak on behalf of them. I do not work for them. They don't give me money. They seem like nice people. I really don't know them, and I'm not going to speak on their movement or anything like that. So that's not what I'm doing. This is the most recent news as I have received. If you've heard anything else, please put it down in the comments because I'm obviously not the source of all truth. I don't know everything that's going on. All I'm telling you, the information that I have that was given to me from Passio. But all I ask is that if you do put information down in the comments, please name the source that you got it. Because a lot of people say a lot of things, and I just want to make sure it's accurate. And then I already answered that. So first I'm going to read this to you, make a couple comments, and then after that I'm going to go into the rest of the comments about the MEV. So I'm going to read this to you. It says, I've been trying to get firm answers. This is from my contact in Passio. I've been trying to get firm answers from the project team regarding a schedule for the updated release of the MEV, as there are many inquiries coming to me regarding the updated MEV text. Sadly, I haven't been able to nail down a committed project schedule. The delay of the update is primarily tied to the sell through of current stock. Our sales team is working to open additional distribution channels to reduce current inventory, including the discount distributors you mentioned. Okay, so what I did was we have I'm not going to name it, but we have a wholesaler near us, and they sell discounted. So when places are going to business overstock, they get they buy it out, and then you can buy it for discounted prices. And they actually do carry a lot of Bibles, and I've gotten quite a few Bibles from there that I would have paid significantly for. I mean, up to 75% off of what I normally would pay. And sure enough, when I went last time, I found MEV Bibles there. For the first time I'd ever been there, I found MEV Bibles there, and here's a couple pictures of what I saw. When I went there, I actually saw the MEV Bible there, and like I said, it got me to email them about it and say, why am I, now seeing them in wholesalers? Just because I wanted to know, is this, hey, it was a failed project. Hey, I wish it would have worked out, but it didn't. Kind of wanting to know what's going on. And then I got this response. So that's what he's actually responding to in this email. And he goes, the distributors you mentioned. So, however, inventory is not moving as quickly as anticipated, and so the previously projected update is not falling into place. Thank you for your continued interest and support. I look forward to the day I can provide you with firm project schedule for the update release of the MEV text. Okay, here's a couple thoughts. It's been 5 years. 5 years. Most of them, I don't think I don't know exactly the schedule, but 5 years is a pretty long time. Now, depending on if this is going to be one of those continually updated few things every year, which he said is going to try to be fixed, but we'll see. But 5 years is a pretty long time. They're not selling very well. And now they're selling them to wholesale distributors to get rid of their overstock, either A, because they've given up that they'll sell much more, or B, because they're really wanting to get the update out. And I can't really say one way or another what's going on. What I do know is they probably made too many first edition publications, or published too many the first time, and that has caused an overstock. And it does have quite a market to go to overcome. So I wish I could say that the MEV is going to be around, but I really don't know. What I can tell you is they've never told me that they're not. And so based off their word, I think it's going to happen based on their word. But I can't guarantee anything. I can't guarantee anything, and that's just the way it goes. This is the process. I will say, someone mentioned that it's very unlikely that'll be a fixed text. Yeah, I agree. I think that would be the ideal, and what they mean by that when they say fixed text is that they hopefully want something a little more solid. Fixed meaning permanent, but anyway, I'm thinking I'm going to answer that here in a minute. But I want to give you that update. Personal opinion is the MEV has a lot of potential. In my opinion, I think it does. I think there's some unfortunate translation things they do in there that they make, different verse translations and word translations and things like that. I think they could change. Overall, though, a general view of the Bible, really appreciate it. I really appreciate it. Used it for 3.5 years here at the church, and appreciate the translation. And does it have some shortfalls? Absolutely it does. But all in all, if they can fix it, and some of these issues that have been brought up either in my comment sections or in there, and that have been brought to them, then I really think the MEV will pick up speed and can recover ground in the Bible translation market. And I think it could be a staple for a TR translation in the future. We'll just have to wait and see. As for a 2019 update, I really don't see it being published in 2019. If they're going to go through with it, it'll probably be next year or the year after. Again, I'm not them. I can't speak for them. What I can say is I've been waiting for about 2 years now for an updated version, and they're still having trouble selling out that stock. So this is kind of where I'm at. You have information, please put comment below. Also tell me the source by which you got it, so we can kind of decipher what is actually hearsay and what is actually true. So on that note, I'm going to move on to some of these comments and questions. Let me see here. TR followers go by emotion, not by historical fact. That sounds like someone that I've heard before. And what I'll just tell you about that is keep researching, my friend. I used to say those kind of things, those very same words. I was a critical text advocate. I read critical text translations. I had that standard until it was challenged, and I started doing research. And I not only research in the world of textual criticism, but in research in what God says about His Word and how that should reflect our view of the biblical text. And that matters. And if you don't think that matters, then you're approaching it from an angle that I don't think is scriptural. Um, and what I would tell you is I would broaden my base a little and read something that challenges the contemporary textual bandwagon. This is a textual bandwagon that is going on right now that may turn, it may end. You need to read things that challenge it. Don't just take things because someone you respect say it. Do the research yourself and look into it. And to dismiss a position with such statements, I believe, is a bit irresponsible if you're not willing to hear the arguments made that are legitimate. And that's, I say people with, like I said, and the people with the King James. The only reason I say this because it applies to the MEV, because people's like, well, you don't even need this because it's not a good text to have manuscripts on. But even with King James Version only, not every argument by King Jamesers is illegitimate and ridiculous and out there. Some of their arguments are valid. And now you have to be willing and mature enough to hear those arguments and to dismiss the ones that aren't really legitimate, but to embrace and accept the ones that are legitimate. So you have an objective point of view and not just a subjective point of view that's just informed by somebody else. So, all right. So next comment is, I really like the MEV, but two minor issues are 2 Samuel 21:19, who slew Goliath. They get it right in 1 Corinthians or 1 Chronicles 25 and 1 Samuel 17:50. In Micah 5:2, is Jesus Christ from everlasting, or did he have origins or in ancient days? Sorry to tarnish the MEV for you, but I wanted you to be aware. I see a real need for a modern English TR Bible, especially when witnessing to people who are not Bible literate. Okay, so I'm going to read to you my response, so that way I can be particular and move on. I said, I became aware of the issues you brought up about 2 years ago when going through the MEV, and I too find it a fault of the translation. No need to worry, you haven't tarnished the MEV for me. In fact, it was those issues, plus a few others, that made me hesitant in switching for my church. If you look at 2 Samuel 21:19 in the NKJV, the words the brother of are placed in italics, meaning they are not in the Hebrew. The translators did us a favor by placing those words in the text to avoid a potential contradiction. I can think of a number of examples where the NKJV and KJV cleared up the text for us, and consider that a strength of the MEV translating committee would be wise to follow. So I think it is. I agree with you. We should put that in there. It causes unnecessary people offenses. People stumble over that. But I like that they put it in italics. In regard to Micah 5:2, I also agree that the rendering of MEV is unfortunate in the sense that it is accurate, being the terms can mean ancient of days and origin and ancient of days. They can mean that. So it's not technically an inaccuracy, because they can mean that. But context says otherwise. It's where hermeneutics comes in. Context says that one can exegete the text and understand that origin can refer to Jesus' place in eternity, outside of time, space, and creation, who entered into time and space to save mankind, thus going forth is a better and more literal. And the term ancient of days could be understood imperfectly, meaning that there's an indefinite point of view here. So it's ancient of days in the past indefinitely. So ancient days, eternally past, as eternal, but that's a lot of work to understand something that could be rendered more clearly in the MEV. And I agree with you. That's a lot of hermeneutical gymnastics, and that they could clear that up very easily by just translating it in a way that that context would say, that context I think demands. The context clearly shows that Jesus did not have. Clear text shows that Jesus did not have a beginning, but is everlasting. I appreciate you pointing this out. Hopefully, this is on the list of things the translation committee will correct. Okay. There. I'm just going to leave that one there. Does this position mean that I won't use the ESV and New American Standard, etc.? No, it doesn't mean that. I use a lot of translations. It means the textual base that I lean on is the TR and Masoretic text. The ESV and NASB, they're tremendous blessings. They help us and they help aid us in understanding the text. You get many times a very conservative approach to the translation. in those manuscripts, and they render things very well, and it helps you with your understanding. So I'm not against using those things. I just, because I have a position that stands with the traditional text, doesn't mean I want to throw the baby out with the bathwater. Okay, there are obviously good things about those translations. I don't want to throw those things out, but the truth is I have a position, and the position is TR. So that's why my main text is MEV, or my main text MEV, King James, New King James, TR translation Bibles. It says, now the next question. While reading the MEV, I noticed this. KJV, 1 John 1:4. That your joy may be full. MEV, our joy may be complete. I believe the Greek and the TR is your. Do you know why the MEV has changes? Is it just typo? Thanks. I've been through the MEV, and I'm just going to tell you, I've noticed that they have departed from the TR on a few occasions. The occasion I could think of right now are John 1:28, Acts 1:8, Galatians 5:1, John 21:17, and the one you mentioned. I do not feel these departures make a significant difference in the translation for me, and some could represent a different translation of the TR, like Acts 1:8, or like Bethabara to Bethany, or Jonah to John. I'm not exactly sure why they departed in these instances, unless it's to update the names to make translation more clear, or to bridge some of the gap between other modern translations to a TR translation. That is one thing I do appreciate about the MEV, is that I can use it with other modern translations. All in all, these departures do not bother me. Can't answer for every departure. I think you can get that. In fact, even in critical text Bibles, they will even depart from the critical text where they feel there's more support for another reading. If you read the introduction of an Old Holman says, we mainly use these texts, and we only departed when we felt like a better reading that could be chosen than what was in the Nelson's Greek text and United Bible Society text. Even they do it, so this is pretty normal. Have you heard of there being any different formats with the new update? I really like the thin line, but I would nice to see a format with a bit bigger print. Thanks again. I really have no idea. I believe they're going to see the popularity. They're going to see the popularity of the translation, and if it picks up traction, they will probably broaden the formats to buy. That's what you can think of, but not at this point. Not when they can't sell what they already have. Just as there were KJV and RV Bibles, I'd like to see a KJV and MEV Bible translation side by side in the study Bible. And they did make a KJV MEV side by side, but I believe they sold out pretty quickly. With that, I believe they will do that again. And I'm not sure if it's a study Bible, what you mean by study Bible, if it's just because it's parallel or if it actually has study notes. But I believe they will do that again in the future. Don't think you could have a fixed translation. English word changes more rapidly than ever before. I hope we fixed for at least a generation, 40 years. This is probably more realistic. Thanks for the update. Very excited. God bless. I think you're right about this. I think you're right. Most of us would like to see a fixed translation, but understand that that is unrealistic. Perhaps the best way we can get is a semi-fixed translation that only updates after a generation instead of a few years. Kind of like the New American Standard. It took a long time to update it. Freaky. Anyway, I think what they were meant by a fixed translation is one that doesn't change and it remains faithful for future translations, like the KJV did for the MEV and New King James. So, for example, they would just come out with a new translation, and this translation would remain. So instead of just constantly updating this translation, they would update it, make it right, and then they would fix it for 40 years. And then in 40 years, instead of updating it again, they would just come out with a new translation with that translation, New King James and King James as its backbone, instead of what you see is constantly updating translation every number of years. But so again, it becomes a fixed translation, and then we come out with new translations with updated language, but that keeps it fixed in history. Like I said, that's just a way to think about it. But maybe but you're probably right. It probably will not be a fixed translation. So dealing with the ties to charisma media and corresponding movement. I would really encourage you to look at the substance of the translation. Don't look, if it has charismatic leanings in it, then you're absolutely right. But if you can't find them, then deal with the substance of the translation. The charismatics have used every translation that Baptists use. It's not really a translation issue, at least not in this case, but an interpretation issue. And I don't mean that to put down charismatics. I just want to point out that I know charismatics that use the Christian Standard Bible, which is a Southern Baptist translation, or they use a New American Standard, or they use an ESV, or they use an NIV. The fact is that judge it by the substance within the book, within the Bible. If it accurately represents the text, judge it by that, and just say, well, because it's connected with those people, I'm going to completely dismiss it. And I wouldn't do that. I wouldn't do that, because on the translation committee there were other people, other denominations, and you can dig into that, and there's been people say stuff about that. But again, the ultimate proof is in the pudding. Test the substance. Look at the substance. Test the substance. If you feel like it represents well and you can't find any huge leanings, then it's a good translation. If so, then it's a bad translation. That's something for you to judge, but I wouldn't judge it off that. So, okay. Are there cheap costing MEV Bibles that can be bought in large quantities? Yes. It's biblesinbulk.com. And if you go to biblesinbulk.com and look up MEV, you can actually find MEV Bibles in bulk there and buy them in bulk. Next question or comment. That's good news. The NKJV and MEV are both good translations, although the NKJV feels like chunky soup and the MEV is a smooth tasting soup in comparison with each other. I agree. And the fact that you reference the Bible as food makes it very clear to me. That is probably but the regards to the NKJV being chunkier is probably for the same reason the King James is chunkier. Can you say chunky on YouTube? If this doesn't come out, we'll know. The KJV and New King James are chunkier because the adherence not only to the text, but the cadence and many times the structure of the original Greek and the original languages. The King James and New King James both try to hold to that grammatical structure. And I actually found this out when I was studying many passages exegetically, found out that both of them represent the not only, like I said, not only formal equivalence word for word, but also follow many of the grammatical structures as well, which makes them chunkier. The MEV is more like for me, the MEV makes a great reading Bible for immediate understanding and clarity, but lacks in accuracy in many cases. Like those who regularly use the ESV and use the New American Standard for study. That's what I did before I went on the KJV challenge. You can see that in the video past. I would preach and carry and use the MEV, but when I was reading I also read through the New King James for study and memorization. And I do that, and I also use the King James. So I use those tools that are more accurate and chunkier, but they more represent the text for study tools, and I would preach out of the MEV. So that's what I did. Okay, so next one. I've heard that the word sodomy has been completely removed. Why would they do that? Replaced with male temple prostitute, because not all sodomites are temple prostitutes. This would leave the door open today to possibly believing as long as one isn't a temple prostitute, one can have this relationship between two consenting adults. Does anyone have any more information on this? That is true, kinda. The 1 Corinthians 6 does say male prostitutes, but the MEV uses the term sodomite in 1 Timothy 1:10. That's basic information. The Bible speaks against the active and passive partners in same-sex relationships. Perhaps that's what they were going for. Actually, it is interesting. I was listening to a conference. I was listening to a conference of a very well-known speaker. I'm not going to tell you who it was, confronting this issue today. And he actually used the term sodomite, and he says, and that's a biblical term. That's a biblical term. But the translation he uses on a normal basis, sodomite's not to be found in there. It is kind of hard to prove to an English-speaking people that sodomite is a biblical term when it's not in the Bible that you preach from. So I agree with you. Where those terms are found in the original text, they should be found in the English text, or the original equivalents of those terms. They should be used. And I do view it as a problem. I do view it as a problem, and I agree with you. But they do put sodomite in there in 1 Timothy 1:10. All right, so I do see this as an issue because I've talked to people all the time about this issue, and it is hard to prove that case from a translation that chooses to take a more of a interpretive role and maybe bent towards monoculture than it is to take a more accurate role and use the terms that actually represent it. So, all right, the next one. I was so excited to find there was a translation from TR in Modern English with the hope of it being very accurate. Watched a couple of YouTube videos with your enthusiasm led me to order the same format you showed in large print. Not yet received it from CBD, but yet it's coming a few days. Then I watched another YouTube which shows some apparent accuracy in this translation. The speaker compared several verses to KJV, and I compared some of those same verses with KJV, Strong's, New King James, found that at least 2 cases the speaker in the video was correct. I would like to know what your thoughts on this. Please compare Isaiah 58:8, especially Ezekiel 16:4-9, and with the MEV and King James, New King James. Ezekiel 16:4-9 says the opposite about the poor and needy than every other translation I checked. This is troubling to the point where I am considered just returning the MEV to CBD when it arrived. Maybe you can help me with this. You're right. I'm not negating that claim. Like I said, I'm not an advocate for every reading in the MEV. There are clear issues that need to be resolved, but again, make your judgment when the new release comes out. That will show you what will be the pattern of this translation. If they do a good job of correcting the clear problems, then great, and all our feedback helped. But if they don't, then we have other good translations to choose from. So just remember that. Now, this is probably pretty long, so I might make it in a 2-part series. But on that note, that are some of the questions I answered. Hopefully you found this video helpful. If you did, please like and subscribe to this channel. Again, I look forward to the future of the MEV, hoping that they correct these issues and make us a very accurate modern English translation. So have a good day, and God bless.